think Ralph actually set the scene well in terms of what that BIM is. So what I'll do is, as just sort of background, the Centre of Construction Law and Dispute Resolution at King's College undertook a research and prepared a report, which I was fortunate to be part of, but I think the heavy lifting has to be credited to actually David, was called Enabling BIM Through Procurement and Contract. The research was kindly funded by the Society of Construction Law and the Association of Consultant Architects. They had two briefs. The initial brief was from the SCL to survey, analyse and basically report on the way in which processes can influence and be influenced by the implementation of BIM at levels 2 and 3. And with a kind grant from the ACA, that was extended to the analysis of BIM and new procurement models. Right. Immediately after, a BIM research group was put together, and that was from sort of leading specialists in the field of BIM, procurement and contract. And then there was a sort of decision on to sort of interview 40 individuals within organizations. Now, these were kind of organizations of what I like to call kind of early adopters of the process. Some of them you can see here. The remainder, by the way, I have a copy if anyone wants to just kind of quickly glance through after. The full list actually is in the report. Now, what I like to, what's important is that we've actually had interview from across the board, what I call all the players, and nearly all were actually sitting down face to face, talking through with these individuals who are either involved in BIM-enabled projects or actually leading the process. So majority of those, as I said, were actually face to face. I had a session with Ralph actually on Skype. That was one of those, and wanted to actually interviews on the phone. David talked about two pilot projects for the Ministry of Justice, Cookham and North Wales Prison, who were the pilot projects for the government. The working group looked at sort of basically 10 others, and you can see the list, and it's quite nice to see the sort of broad in terms of sectors that we actually looked at that actually sort of started to use the process. Before kind of going through the rest, what I thought would be quite nice to sort of basically give you a bit of themes and trends that came from sort of talking to the industry as a whole. And that was interesting, because it does actually have some synergy with what actually Ralph already said. And I think the first one was in terms of disparity of knowledge and application and practice when it comes to BIM. And possibly that meant that what BIM needs to deliver at level 2 wasn't quite clear or consistent across the board, which was again quite interesting. Possibly some of that could be because I say that the BIM as a process seems to come with kind of a load of jargon and acronym as well. So you've got a new process and you've got a lot of these things also to digest and understand what's that, which doesn't quite tie in with our kind of terms at the moment. But what's quite interesting, new roles have started to emerge. These new roles are actually for various sort of basically, clients, contractors, consultants putting in expertise to actually help them, adopt the process. Some contractors have, BIM, have got now BIM coordinators, BIM managers. Internal consultants have BIM leads or, sort of BIM managers who sort of implementing and helping them actually look at the process and implement on the projects. And the consultants have actually started using these new breed of consultants that have introduced into the process, called BIM consultants. We were actually quite fortunate to speak to one of them, who actually works with the majority of private sector clients. Now, naturally, contractors, basically Ralph mentioned the 4D, 5D, 6D. All of these are the benefits, the efficiencies that they can bring for contractors. So they're well ahead. They seem to lead the way. Whoa, where did they go? very quickly. So basically, when talking to the interviewees about level 3 and full life cycle approach, although they felt, well, that's the right path to take, but it's still seen as long-term aspirations. Just very quickly, Mark Bew was kind enough to actually write an introduction for the report, and these are just sort of extracts of some of his quotes, sort of acknowledging that's the fascination across the section of the industry that was actually sort of interviewed about level 2 and the fact that the contractual relationship between the employer and the supplier seems to remain intact, and basically the performance hour traditional working that could be actually improved and it could be seen to improve. So what happened next? 2 years, what I call as kind of a penultimate version of the report was prepared by May. So we had this final draft in May, but 2 very important events fed into and enhanced that offer as a report. One was a workshop we had with a working group and other participants, totally, all the people that, well, majority of the people we've actually interviewed and talked to, and we'd sort of discussed basically some of the issues and some of the content of what the research is basically flushed out, which was quite good. And also we had a conference in May actually at King's College, and that conference every delegate was actually given a copy of that draft report. They were given a deadline to actually come back with any comments. So again, as I said, both of those were also incorporated. Now, you don't have to remember that website page. All you have to do is Google Centre of Construction Law and Dispute Resolution at King's College, and it will direct you to the report that you can actually now freely download. Now, so what are the BIM enablers, the clear provisions basically required? Now, everyone, all the interviews agreed that BIM as a process can bring efficiencies. I think Ralph kind of gave you kind of clear insight into that. But that would require exactly who does what, when, at what work stage, right across from design, supply, and construction. But basically, at the moment, our kind of our contracts are not quite linked to basically the timing of BIM contribution, and that's sort of an issue. The interviews did agree that yes, we can manage risk better, as actually Ralph mentioned, health and safety and so on and so forth. But there are other risks that, like unfortunately, about sort of interoperability of the software and a couple of issues like that, which have risks that need to be managed better, because there's a greater reliance, as you can imagine, on each other and the softwares and support. We'll come back to that briefly later. But I think the threat of the IP rights, it was found that actually is the one that is really holding back, in quite some ways, the actual adoption of BIM. I mean, the project team need to rely on each other's IP, kind of basically ownership contribution. And they not only have to have that right, they have to have it sort of licensed in really such a way that it can be actually used not across just, as I said, the design and construction, but on completion, on the use, management, maintenance, and repair work subsequently. Same thing going on. I did mention about the sort of jargon and the terminology that BIM brings. That sort of basically creates a lack of clarity as such that, say, for example, how you actually connect or link BIM documents and incorporate it into which procurement document and contract, contracts generally, contract terms and so on. As I said, I briefly mentioned on the software. Software is an issue in talking with the interviewees. Interoperability, sort of change and loss, corruptions and so on. And even worse than that, the fact that the software companies limit their liability, or they sort of wash their hands and say, well, here you are, this is software, it does a really good job, If it goes wrong, then it's between you, so you lot to sort it out. So these sort of things, these exclusions are the type of things that, if it's not sorted in some ways, will actually transfer that liability to a client. Very quickly, I think the limitation of liability in the CICBM protocol is actually clearly set out. I mean, that is actually discussed in some length in here, so I won't go into that. But what's interesting is that when I asked actually whether the responsibilities of any team members were actually changed with the adoption of BIM, the unanimous answer was no. And I think the comment by one interviewee that kind of captures the ethos in that answer was that the team are in it together and they need to deliver together. Very quickly, I think that's the penultimate slide. Now, all the projects that actually were looked at, actually for the research, had some form of early contractor involvement. And that's basically on par with the sort of UK government's perception of kind of unlocking efficiencies that's required in the process, not just again through the design and construction and completion, but beyond being able to actually manage and maintain a built form. There's a great deal of interest in a kind of a multi-party contract, but all of the interviewees actually had some form of a contract in place that they actually worked on their BIM-enabled projects. So it's very unlikely that we can actually get the clients and the team to change that to actually. So basically, what might be an option or a way forward would be to actually leave those two-party contracts in place, but have it alongside it a multi-party protocol that can actually deal with some of the sort of points and issues that I've actually raised during the session. Create that sort of direct relationship between the team to be able to kind of enable them to rely basically on each other's information, about a mechanism that actually can deal with not just basically a clash detection, but the resolution of a clash, and that's important. To create this direct mutual IP rights, to be able to have clarity as to the reliance on data and BIM software, a better link, and I think that's important, better link to repair, maintenance and operation of the sort of built form, actually, so to speak. I think lastly, it's to kind of create a mechanism like a joining agreement within it to bring in additional members of the team as required, when required, into the process. And, thank you.